Hi everybody, I wanted to go ahead and get us started with our webinar today. So we're talking about social media in online learning. We're going to talk about the applications that are available, how we can put them into practice, and we're going to cover a lot of the research and the theory behind the platforms of social media and how we can best integrate those into our classrooms. And this should be a pretty fun session, I think. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm Sean Nufer, and with me today is Thad Stott, who is our instructional technologist within the Department of Instructional Technology. And
Hello.
hey, Thad. We're going to tag team this webinar. So I'll give a portion first, and then I'm going to hand it over to Thad so that he can talk about the intricacies of the learning theories. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to talk, before I get into specific social media, about my dissertation, not necessarily my topic. I don't want to bore you or anger you or put you to sleep or anything, but just the concept of writing a dissertation. So I had a dissertation chair and 2 readers. 3 people read my dissertation. I had a copy editor who thoroughly read my dissertation, and my parents read some of the discussion section, and I know periodically over the years I get contacted by somebody who wants to know more, but I'd say probably less than 10 people in the whole world have read my dissertation, and something that I spent a lot of time on. So I'll mention that, spent a lot of time for nobody to read this big paper, this big research that I did. Now, compare that to a couple years ago, I did a presentation at a conference. It was about infographics in higher education, and it was well attended. It was a medium-sized classroom, standing room, and it went over pretty well, I think. And at the end of the presentation, I presented them with a QR code where they can access a video that I created. And so these are the stats for that video, called Creating an Infographic Using PowerPoint and iPixie.com. I created it for the attendees of that conference, thinking that maybe a few of them will be interested in learning a little bit more, but nothing major would come of it. And since then, it's been viewed over 11,000 times. For whatever reason, that topic really took off in the last 4 years. It's been watched for 39,600 minutes, which is about 660 hours people have spent watching this video, which is just a 13-minute video that I created as a supplement to a conference presentation. So if you compare these two things, I spent years and hours, days at a time researching for my dissertation to really be read thoroughly by about 4 people, and as opposed to this other presentation that has been seen by people all over the world, not just people in the U.S., but see from the stats there, Thailand, India, UK, Philippines. So that's the kind of the difference between traditional education, the model that we've had. People today, they don't just write a report that's only seen by one person who's the professor or maybe a few people, like my dissertation. Social media allows us to produce things that can be seen by hundreds or thousands, even by millions of people. I'm not lofty enough to think that any of my work would ever be seen by a million people, but there are opportunities, venues out there for us to really share and make an impact with our work in the broad society. So, goodness, I think this poll won't work, but I want you to think back to a meaningful learning moment and think about what made that moment memorable for you. GoToWebinar's having a problem with this with this poll, but just think about that. Something that you learned that you still consider that you learned it. What is it that really made that memorable for you? And we're going to revisit that later on. But for now, we're talking about online learners. Now, social media, it doesn't have to be only an online learning. There are plenty of applications for traditional and blended platforms to engage in social media. But generally, social media, it involves online activity, online behaviors. So the question is, how do we use the internet? And I actually have an answer to that. For our students, we've sent out polls for the last few years asking students what kind of technology they use, what kind of activities do they engage in on the internet, how much time do they spend online every day. And these are some of the answers that we got. So we're looking at this blue slice of the pie, less than 2 hours. Very few people spend less than 2 hours online. And in 2012, around a tenth of people spent less than 2 hours online. In 2016, which was last December when we administered the survey, we're looking at about 6% of people spent less than 2 hours online. The vast majority of people spend either 2 to 5 hours or 6 to 10 hours online. So for each of these samples, the vast majority of this represents that 2 to 10 hours online, which is a significant amount of time online. Another way to look at this very same data would be, pull it up here. So this is that same data, and we're noticing some trends here. For people who spend less than 2 hours online, fewer and fewer people each year, each time we administer this survey, are reporting that they spend less than 2 hours online. Fewer and fewer people are saying they spend 2 to 5 hours online. And more often we're seeing people spend increasing amounts of time online, engaging in internet behaviors. And so what kind of things do they use? Do they do online? It's not just schoolwork. I mean, I'm sure they say, I only study, I only research and go into Canvas and complete my coursework. That's the only thing I do. No, they engage with family, with friends, they share pictures, a lot of social media, and we'll be quite honest, the internet's used for cats and memes. A lot of people go online for entertainment, watching Netflix or looking at pictures of cats. So I mentioned this, online activity, to form this question, why do we want to change our classrooms? We've been doing things the same way since Socrates, and we've had classrooms and lectures and ways that we present information that's been handed down from generation and millennia, really. But I want to look at two different things. I'm going to put some boxes up here. One, on this left box, I want us to consider, what does a typical classroom look like? As a professor, what does a classroom look like? And there's not one answer. Obviously, in the last webinar, we touched on it. It might look this way for a K-12 person or a K-6 person. It might be a classroom with desks and kids and chalkboard and pictures. Or it could be a distinguished professor at a university speaking in a lecture hall. Or it could be another distinguished teacher in a more intimate graduate level setting with a circled wagon approach and rolled up sleeves with his button down shirt. That's what we think of as classrooms. They take many shapes and forms, but ultimately the purpose of a classroom is to bring people together and to engage the people. I want to ask in this next box, what do you think that students consider to be a learning environment? If you're to ask, what does a learning environment look like? Many of them will say, well, a classroom is a learning environment, but also maybe a library. To be honest, probably a lot of our students consider home, their beds, their couches, they're in their pajamas, to be where they do a lot of their learning. Or it could be a coffee shop, or this guy on a train, or a plane, or anywhere listening to a podcast or a lecture while out jogging or something. You know, online learning has really changed what a learning environment looks like, because people can learn anywhere. So I want to touch on that now. What does learning look like specifically for online? What are the students doing? For one, they need computers. They're online, they're plugged in, and a lot of people go matriculate into online programs as opposed to traditional programs because they want that applied practice they want to be doing. They're busy people with busy lives, and they want their learning to be on the go just like the rest of their life. So they're looking for that applied practice. But now we're talking about students, but there are more people who are learners than just students who are in a program or a university. Everybody can be a learner. And some of the biggest resources that we have right now are Google or search engines and YouTube. People look up Google, probably most of us look up something on Google every day. And then there's that behemoth that is YouTube. YouTube is fantastic. Why do people go to YouTube? I mean, I would argue I have no empirical evidence to support this statement, and it's not based in any kind of facts or anything, but I would say YouTube's probably the greatest thing for education, maybe ever. I mean, I say that maybe that's my get out of the claw statement. But with Google and YouTube, we can look up instant material. We can look at right now. We can it can be self-paced. We can go faster or slower. We can rewind. We can skip to the part that we want. If I'm a new car owner and I want to learn how to change my oil, then I can look up a video. And a lot of times YouTube is mobile because we have our phones, so we can go out and we can say, I want to learn how to do this thing, pull up a tutorial. You can search for the right tutorial for you. Do you want a talking head? Do you want more of a formal presentation? Maybe a demonstration or a simulation? It depends on what you're studying, what you're learning about. And again, this doesn't have to be students in a classroom or academic setting, but anybody just in the world can be a learner, and YouTube really makes information accessible to everybody. So we're seeing a shift from Web 1.0, the early days where a webmaster creates a web page and people go and visit that web page and that's how they acquire information, to more of a collaborative environment where people snap pictures, put it on Instagram, then they'll write a blog post where they pull other people's Instagrams and those get tweeted out and maybe put on a Pinterest board, and people create YouTube videos. And then we have things like this. Now, you probably recognize this tweet from Ellen from the show, the Oscar show. It was instantly shared. It was a way to collaborate. They're on TV, but they're collaborating with audience. People are retweeting and liking and commenting in real time and also asynchronously after the fact. And it's a way to really engage people. They were able to engage people with the audience. So now we're going to talk about what makes learning effective, efficient, and engaging. So I'm going to turn the time over to Thad.
Cool, thanks, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I know that we have a pretty small group, so if you guys have any questions, would like to speak up or chime in, just go ahead and leave a comment or a question in the question box, and we'll try to address any questions that you have and take the discussion wherever you would like. But yeah, so as Sean said, I'm going to talk a little bit about some effective instructional principles that can be implemented with social media in mind, social media in the classroom. As I'm sure most of us are aware, education is changing. The way that we disseminate information is constantly improving, and things are a lot different than maybe what we were used to as we were growing up. Sean had asked you guys a question about thinking back to a time in your life when you felt an instructional setting was effective and engaging. Think back to that time again. Think about the setting. Think about where you were. Think about the conditions, the people who were present, and take a minute to really kind of think about the principles that really stuck out to you and helped you learn. What was it that was so beneficial about that experience? Also, in contrast, think about some times that that weren't very effective. Maybe some situations where you were forced to learn, or you felt forced to learn, I should say, where maybe you weren't happy to be there. The learning environment wasn't an effective situation for you. What are some of the differences of those two scenarios, experiences? As you see some of these pictures here, it might take you back to some of your experiences in education. And in my own personal experience, my life, for me personally, those settings and situations where I felt were most beneficial to me were usually in social, interactive settings. In a way that the instruction was almost where my own instructional development was sort of created within myself and contributed throughout the society that I was in. And some of the less effective times were where I was sort of forced to sit and listen, whether I wanted to be there or not. maybe you guys have differing opinions or experiences in that, but I think that as we address some of these strategies and methods in effective, efficient, and engaging instruction, I think most of us will agree that we are actually kind of experts in and sort of equipped through our own experiences to be experts in instruction and content acquisition. So, Sean, why don't you go? Why don't you take us to the next slide? I think is that the YouTube video?
That's right. Let me just play that. Go ahead and play it. Tell me when you want me to stop or pause it.
Okay. Go ahead and play it.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it again.
You guys may have seen that video a little bit before, but I just wanted to get the point across to show that, you know, sometimes even though we may know what's best or what works, we tend to follow suit. We tend to imitate or learn from others in our settings, and even though we may not understand the methods or reasoning behind some of the actions that we are participating in, social and external influences play a very heavy role in our educational experiences. Tradition, custom, habit, and even personal preference or ego has conditioned many of us to hold on to, utilize, and pass on ineffective, inefficient, and unengaging instruction. But in this, in this age of technology and communication and information, we have, well, as educators and even as learners, we have the responsibility to be the change and to shift the paradigms by utilizing technologies and strategies of a connected society. Go ahead and take us to the next slide, Sean. Instructional technology, or at least the learning psychology and theory behind instructional technology is actually a fairly recent discipline. Started off around the late 1800s. Well, I mean, as far as the sciences and theory behind it, obviously we have philosophers and theorists far earlier, but behaviorism and constructivism were sort of the pioneering thought in learning theory and educational psychology, and they've helped us better understand the science and psychology behind learning. And I'm going to touch on a little of these theories in relation to social media and how we can implement some of these theories into social media. Our modern educational systems and instructional paradigms have been greatly influenced by the works of these pioneers, but in many formal educational systems and settings, their work has also been ignored, for the most part. So we're gonna talk a little bit about some of these individuals and a little bit about what they brought to us and how we can use these theories in social media and social learning through technology and digital information. So Jean Piaget, the first one there, with the glasses and the pipe. He's he's sort of the founder of cognitive constructivism. And he brought to us that learning is a dynamic process, sort of comprising of successive stages of adaptation to reality, where activity construct knowledge by creating and testing the theories and ideas within ourselves of the world, sort of building our own worldviews of based on our experiences. And a lot of his work helps us understand that instruction is active. Content acquisition is an active process. It should be. It maybe not necessarily always is, but in an effective and engaging setting, content acquisition and learning is active. Vygotsky, the next one over, the younger looking guy, showed us that learners are impacted by their peers. Social scenarios impact learners' ability to acquire information. And so, as such, instructors, educators who apply the sort of the sociocultural learning theory, which is the theory that Vygotsky sort of pioneered, in their instructional design, can also become aware of how learners may directly impact one another, as well as how cultural norms can influence learners' learning behavior. They can create an e-learning course. I guess I should say educators can create courses, e-learning courses, or even social media courses that plan and integrate the principles of sociocultural learning in order to achieve the effectiveness of the curriculum. Many schools have sort of traditionally held this transmissionist or instructionist model, where the teacher or the lecturer sort of transmits the information to the students. David Merrill, who's the last person on this slide, he calls this method the spray and pray method, where you spray the information to the students and pray that they get it. And traditionally, that method has existed probably longer than it should have. Although it is a good method for delivering certain types of information, it's not always the best method in providing authentic learning experiences and instructional strategies that are durable and that learners retain. I'm going to kind of go through and talk a little bit about Merrill here, just because we're a little bit short on time. But yeah, why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm just going to get into some instructional strategies that Merrill has introduced. So the problem-centered or problem or task-centered approach to instruction is where students learn more when the instruction is centered or, well, as I said, I guess more relevant on real-world tasks or problems, where students take a natural approach to learning. And in a social media setting, as you guys know, sometimes going onto YouTube is the best and easiest way to learn how to fix a refrigerator. In fact, yesterday, the condenser fan in our refrigerator went out, and I had never dissected a refrigerator before, but I didn't want to pay a repairman to come in and replace the fan, $300 for a $50 part. So I went to YouTube and watched somebody do it and did it on my own. It was quite effective. And that was a real-world setting for me. I had the instruction, and I was able to apply that instruction in a real-world scenario. I had a problem. My refrigerator was broken. Our food was decomposing, thawing out. I was able to fix the refrigerator without too much delay or problems. As you see, activation, demonstration, application, integration on here are all components of a problem or task-centered approach to instruction. I'll just touch a little bit on what these are. Activation is where the instructor helps the students recall prior knowledge? Do they have existing knowledge so that this activation can, well, so that the new content can sort of be associated with knowledge that they already have, and that information becomes more durable when it's based on or related to active information. Demonstration is where students learn more when new knowledge is demonstrated to them in the context of real-world tasks or problems, such as that YouTube video that I watched in repairing my refrigerator. I had a real-world problem, and I still know how to fix a condenser fan. You know, it definitely stuck with me. Application is where students learn more when they perform real-world tasks or solve real-world problems. Integration is where students learn more when they're encouraged to integrate their new knowledge into their life throughout reflection, discussion, or debate, and even presentation of this new knowledge. And all of these principles in these first principles instructions are greatly amplified and increased through social interaction, and can be strategies in planning out how to utilize social media in the classroom or instructional settings. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, John. Durable learning principles are based on some more recent research that have actually brought in some pretty astounding results that have been hard to argue. I mean, obviously, there are differing opinions in pretty much any study, but generally speaking, the research in durable learning principles has been very significant and has made a very big impact on learning. And it is actually sort of sometimes a new paradigm to what some of our founding pioneers in learning theory have brought us. For example, so spaced repetition is one of these learning principles. You may have heard about it. It's a learning technique that incorporates increasing intervals of time between review or previously learned material in order to sort of exploit the psychological spacing effect. And while interleaving these principles, these sections of time, concepts and principles into the spaced repetition. So I'm looking at this chart, this graphic right here, and as you can see, it's kind of broken up into chunks. It's commonly known as chunking. And when we space our repetition and interleave or integrate intertwining concepts and principles, necessarily not mastering them, but moving on and interleaving these principles, research has shown that even if the student hasn't necessarily mastered the concept, interleaving it into the curriculum in spaced repetition has shown some pretty successful results in content understanding and acquisition. Varied practice or mixed practice refers to the use of training, of a sort of a training schedule, a curriculum that includes frequent changes of a task so that the performer is constantly confronting novel situations of the to be learned information. So for example, one study they had done was basketball practice. Traditionally, in many scenarios, repetition is what we were told is the best way to learn and to master a certain topic, a certain skill. But study has shown that if you vary or mix that practice, instead of just throwing free throws over and over and over and over and over, muscle memory is a term that we've heard used quite a bit. It's been found, research has shown that if you change up that practice or mix it around and in the scenario of a basketball practice, shoot from different locations instead of one, that practice is more effective. over time. And it's interesting to see. You guys may want to look into some of that, but interesting research shows that. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Sean. All right, so the community of inquiry is something that Sean talked about a little bit if you guys attended his last webinar. Basically, the critical, in a community of inquiry, the critical role of the educator in a social presence is not only setting the educational climate, but also supporting discourse and creating the educational experience, providing that scaffolding, and integrating durable practices into these learning strategies. There's three concepts or principles in the community of inquiry: the cognitive presence, the teaching presence, and the social presence. The cognitive presence is basically the extent which participants in any particular configuration of a community or inquiry are able to construct meaning through. I'm reading this. It's easier for me to read it than to tell you my experience with it. But construct meaning through sustained communication. The social presence is the ability of learners to project their personal characteristics into the community of inquiry, thereby preserving themselves as real people. And then the teaching presence is defined as the design, the facilitation, and the direction of cognitive and social processes for the purpose of realizing personal, meaningful, and educational worthwhile learning outcomes. So the reason I brought the community of inquiry back into this is because it's the responsibility of the educators to think about these components and these strategies when looking at social media and figuring out strategies and ways to help facilitate instruction and the content delivery process, and being there as the mentor, as the teaching presence to select the content and the setting, the climate, and facilitate the discourse and help direct the discussion of the social presence to create an overall better educational experience. Sean, go ahead. I think that's it for me, and I'll let you wrap us up with how social media, give us some ideas of how we can integrate social media and utilize some of these educational strategies and techniques with social media.
Thanks, Ted. We're going to talk about examples, application, practice. I want to actually go back to this slide here and talk about or just kind of reiterate about this durable learning principle. Now, Nora at the bottom here of the screen, she's the C student. She's average, C is average according. But this is kind of the traditional model of education. You'll go to a classroom, you'll listen to a lecture. Sometimes it's an hour-long lecture, hour and a half, 3-hour-long lecture, and she sits through it in one go, and then the students get assigned homework, and then they go and they leave class, and they don't think about class again unless they're studying or reading, and then they go to the next class and sit through a long lecture. As opposed to Leslie up here, her content is chunked into very small segments, and this is kind of where social media can really benefit the practice of pedagogy, as opposed to just let's make a lecture, let's record a lecture and put it on YouTube, and that is social media. No, social media requires work and engagement, and so we're talking about the social aspect of community of inquiry. How can we really get students to engage with each other, with the content, interact with the teacher in different ways that's more than just a lecture? And so I'll talk about some examples. In our classes, we have discussion boards, and discussion boards have a purpose. It allows for people to share thoughts asynchronously. They can do it on their own time over a span of many days, but a discussion board isn't always the ideal medium for interaction between students. So one thing that I did one time using social media, I created a Pinterest board. for the class. So it was dedicated for the class, something that I would curate as I find articles. I would pin it on my Pinterest board, and I would invite the other class, the students, to be collaborators on that Pinterest board. So if they find things that are relevant to the class, then they can pin it on their board. And then I put that Pinterest board, as you can see here, this is a screenshot of my modules page, and I just put that Pinterest board on each module. I had units for this course. So every unit had a link to that Pinterest board, and as I update the Pinterest board, then that page would update as well. Then what that looked like, so I log on to the Pinterest board page. There's a link where they can go and visit that Pinterest board, or it embeds right within Canvas as well. And if I click on this link here, it takes me, it doesn't want me to show the screen. Let's see. Screen sharing. I'm going to change. Okay, now you can see, now you should be able to see my Pinterest board. I went from sharing my presentation to just sharing the whole screen. So here's the Pinterest board. Throughout the semester, I'll go and pin my interactions, my infographics or articles and other students. And you notice that I even got a few followers who were not students, and a few repins as well, which wasn't my intention, nothing that I care about, but over the course of the term, I pinned 40 things, or my students helped me pin 40 things. And so it might be a different way to interact with the students than the typical discussion thread. So we talked about YouTube, and YouTube, I put this scale here because there's a debate going on with, is YouTube really effective in education, in formal education? YouTube is great for if your refrigerator loses its fan and you can learn how to replace that. It's great to learn how to pot your plants and tend to gardening, or to learn how to do a hairstyle. Does it really have a place in education? And I say, yes, it does, and it can be ineffective at the same time. And so there's bad and good practices in terms of theory and incorporating YouTube in the classroom. The bad would be, several years ago, YouTube created a channel called YouTube Education, YouTube EDU, and it was great. It was groundbreaking, apparently, a way for universities to host content. All these renowned universities, lectures by renowned teachers and professors could upload their lectures, and so you could essentially have the classroom experience online. And that didn't go over too well because people aren't actually interested in watching a 90-minute lecture, even if it's by Dan Ariely or Phil Zimbardo. As interesting as they are, the purpose of YouTube isn't to put lectures online any more than, well, we have access to public libraries. We have access to information. People don't tend to go to public libraries when they can, when it's free. And so that's what YouTube was experiencing. And so they developed, or I guess people put content out there that develops more chunked learning materials. People want shorter. They want fast-paced. They want to build their own lessons. Instead of listening to a 60-minute thing, let me curate maybe 5 or 6 TED Talks that I think are relevant and listen to those. And one example would be a channel called Crash Course. That's the name of the YouTube channel. It's very comprehensive material, and it's incredibly fast-paced, and they're chunked into 9 to 11 minutes. And I actually have a video clip here that I'll show you. So this is one on their channel. They have different topics. They have economics. I chose psychology here. So this is one of their lessons on sensation and perception. What would be an hour-long lecture in most classes, or even a 3-credit semester course. But they did a pretty good job, and it's very fast-paced. I'll play just a minute of that for you. Not even a minute, just a few seconds.
Physician, professor, and author of unusual neurological case studies. We'll be looking at some of his fascinating research in future lessons, but for now, I just want to talk about Sachs himself. Although he possesses a brilliant and inquisitive mind, Dr. Sachs cannot do a simple thing that your average toddler can. He can't recognize his own face in the mirror. Sachs has a form of prosopagnosia, a neurological disorder that impairs a person's ability to perceive or recognize faces. also known as face blindness. Last week we talked about how brain function is localized, and this is another peculiarly excellent example of that. Sachs can recognize his coffee cup on the shelf, but he can't pick out his oldest friend from the crowd because the specific sliver of his brain responsible for facial recognition is malfunctioning. There's no...
All right, so he goes on to say, there's nothing wrong with his brain. I hope the audio worked for that you could hear that. But it's a very engaging, fast-paced, and very informative video series. And so we want to look at, how can we integrate YouTube into our classrooms? We want to find relevant lectures, perhaps, in videos such as this one. You can go ahead and pause that. And we can embed YouTube right into Canvas. Canvas makes it super easy. You can embed videos into announcements, assignment instructions, even blog posts. And another way to integrate YouTube is to have students create YouTube channels, and they can do video blogs. They can script and produce their own videos and share those with each other. And there's a chance that it could be seen by 11,000 people, like the video that I created for my workshop. There's a conference presentation that I didn't think would be seen by more than maybe a couple dozen people, and it's been seen all over the world. And people have that ability, and you don't have to have a sophisticated, this is probably about as good as you can get in terms of production, engaging the students, and you don't have to aspire to that level. Oh, you can aspire, I won't hold you back from that. But let me look at this, this example here. This is just a person, she decided to do a book review, which if you think about from an instructional design standpoint or a professor standpoint, instead of having students do, yeah?
I apologize to cut you off. I just, somebody had a question. I wonder if we should take it before we go on to this next section here.
Yeah.
Rita had a question.
Oh yeah, I don't see the question. Actually, it's not appearing to. Do you want to read that? Or
I'm sorry, her hand raised. She wanted to.
Sure, Rita.
There we go.
I gave you the microphone, Rita. If you.
Okay, thanks. I basically was wanting to add to what you were saying about the different ways that you can engage the students, and also faculty can be engaging as well. I know when I taught an online class, I think this was about a year ago, I actually did a welcome introduction using I had used iSpring.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah,
I had used that to kind of as an icebreaker for the students, welcoming them to the course. And so I thought that was a little fun to do rather than the usual announcement per se. And so I just think being able to utilize a lot of these different resources does make for a better learning experience for the students.
Students love seeing their professor's face. As much as we might be camera shy, students love hearing and seeing from the professor. There's actually been qualitative research to gauge that, and they really appreciate that. They're more wary of sharing their webcam, talking to other students, but we can break them out of their comfort zone. It is beneficial for them. And I'll mention as a side note, iSpring is a great product. It's a PowerPoint plugin, but we have access to something that's even freer than iSpring, because iSpring probably, what does it cost, $150 with our educator's license. But we have Office Mix, which is a Microsoft product that we get for free with our Office 365 suite that we have access to. And so there are a lot of ways that you can play with multimedia, but you don't even have to get very sophisticated. So I'm going to play just a couple seconds of this girl's book review and talk about what's going on here.
Hello everybody, so today I'm going to be doing a book review on Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. Red Queen.
All right, so she's very passionate about this. It's a book review. This is probably not an academic thing, but most students have access to cameras. And Rita, I'm going to go ahead and mute you. Just go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to speak again. But if we look at the composition, what she uses for this, she has a high definition camera, which isn't necessary exactly, but it's sitting on her monitor, and she probably has a good microphone as well. It might be integrated with the camera, it might not, but most laptops have access to cameras. A lot of our students have smartphones. We know that because we've asked them what kind of technology they have, and most of them have access to smartphones with video functionality that they can upload right into Canvas. This girl did a little bit of editing. You see a little bit of jumping here and there where she crops and cuts. And there are a lot of programs, free programs, that you can do that. If you want to pay a little bit of money, you can get more sophisticated, but you don't need to for the purpose of your class. The important thing is seeing the face, hearing the voice, and getting that interaction. Have students create their own YouTube channels using their institutional email address. They can make it private so that only the students who have the links that they share can see it. But yeah, consider YouTube as a great way to really open up the classroom. And you can also integrate the multimedia that's native within Canvas as well, which has a social function as well. It's just contained within the Canvas platform instead of what we regularly think of social media is open to the community. Excuse me. So I have here a list, kind of a sloppy list of examples of social media, and I'm not going to exactly show each platform. I'll just talk through very briefly. So SlideShare, many of you are probably familiar with the concept of SlideShare, where you create presentations with slides, and SlideShare allows you to host it on their servers and share it with other people. Office Mix is what we mentioned. So Rita, iSpring is very similar to Office Mix. iSpring Presenter is probably more similar to Articulate Presenter, but Office Mix can do a lot of that functionality, and it's free, as is Microsoft Sway and Office 365. All three of these are free for us at our institutions, and they're collaborative, which is the social aspect of social media. With Office Mix, you can create your mixes and host them and then share them with other people. With Microsoft Sway, you can take content and create sort of an ebook or presentation that's different than the typical slides, and it's collaborative. You can share access to your Sway with other people by inviting them. Office 365 has that capability too. So Thad and I, as we were preparing this webinar, we actually got onto I put a document on my OneDrive through work, and we were able to open up Word through the browser version, and we were typing away at the same time. Google Docs has had this capability for years, and Microsoft is now catching up. But Microsoft has, you can edit PowerPoints together, which we also did, or spreadsheets. And with OneDrive, you can give people access within your institution to that. We know, everybody knows Wikipedia here, the concept of a collaborative, open-sourced encyclopedia where subject matter experts from all over the world can make sure that it's up to date and they can collaborate. We have a wiki function with Canvas pages, which I think I'll just demonstrate very briefly. I'll pull up a sandbox here because people might not realize the capability of just a simple page. So if I go into a course, this is a dummy course, and I'll click on the pages thing here. I'm going to create a page, just a regular page. The content doesn't really matter. Down here at the bottom, typically this is something that only teachers can edit, but you can give access to students as well. You can say teachers and students, and so students can collaborate, and you can see the different, what do you call it, the different iterations whenever somebody saves it. If I were to save this, then it would save it. If somebody else contributes to it, then they can save it, and I can see that person's contributions and compare the different drafts. And you can also break people up into groups within your class, and they can have their own mini wiki pages. So here I'm going to hop into a random group page. I'll visit the group. And so there's a couple people in this course, and any of them can create a page, and all of a sudden, bam, it's just like Wikipedia. They have their own wiki page that they can edit, and they can curate it and curate the content and submit that. So collaborative sharing in documents is a great thing. Most people know about Prezi, very similar to PowerPoint, except for the concept is you put slides on a canvas instead of slides in a carousel like in PowerPoint. But you can also collaborate. You can share your Prezi and invite other people to collaborate with you. Diigo, D-I-I-G-O, is a shared bookmarking site. So you can, similar to Pinterest, but you can save things on lists and then share the lists with people as well. Blogging is a functionality that Canvas doesn't have, and that's intentional for them, primarily because blogging is a social media thing, whereas Canvas has to sort of stay centralized within the platform. But you can integrate blogs into Canvas. You can embed them, you can share links, and blogging, I put blogging different as the Canvas pages because wikis tend to be very collaborative. Blogs can be individual. Usually it's an individual who writes a post. Sometimes multiple people can work on different posts for the same blog. And sometimes you can have it so that students collaborate on a blog post. You can do whatever you want there. And then this concept of Evernote/OneNote, note-taking platforms that can be collaborative. I think OneNote is much more collaborative than Evernote, but you can share your notes in Evernote with other people. And Evernote's asking for money, whereas OneNote we have for free because of our Office 365. And then OneDrive. So you can upload files. You can upload any file and share that with anybody within your institution, with students. And all of these Office 365 things are very shortly going to integrate very cleanly into Canvas for a very seamless interaction. And so I'm leaving the two behemoths of social media for last. So we'll get to one of them, which is Twitter. Has anybody ever heard of Twitter, this platform? I'm sure that everybody knows what Twitter is, but you might not think about using Twitter in your class. So there are a lot of resources for faculty to integrate Twitter into their lesson plans, into their curriculum, into the teaching. The one thing I have up here, these hashtags, these are actually Twitter chats. So a Twitter chat would be a group of people who log in at the same time and use this hashtag, and they talk in real time through tweets. And these are some of the popular ones. EdChat is probably the oldest and largest, about the oldest and probably the largest education chat. And they meet on Tuesdays at 12 o'clock and 7 o'clock Eastern time. EdTech Chat is one, and they also have an EdTech Chat After Dark. So one is at 8 o'clock Eastern time. The other one would be at 10 o'clock Eastern time, probably for the West Coast people more. And they talk about technology. Higher education live chat would be one. The learning and teaching in higher education chat. These are all great. In addition to participating in live chats or Twitter chats, you can follow influential people. But so for me in my industry, that might be Jane Hart, or it might be Phil Zimbardo or Peter Block, or even celebrities. You have J.K. Rowling. She's active on Twitter. Right now she's fairly political, but she usually has good stuff to say. And my first experience interacting with a celebrity or somebody of a renowned status was I saw an episode on TV from Penn Jillette, and I thought it was interesting, so I tweeted him. I said, hey, I forget whatever my insight was, and I tagged Penn Jillette, and then he responded within an hour or so, and I felt like I was touched by a celebrity. You know, he reached out and he responded to me, and so you can use Twitter to interact with people within, at least follow people. It's not a guarantee that everybody's going to respond to you, but you can really make it interactive. You can also have students create a Twitter account, and you can have assignments. So for example, this might be an example of a tweet in a research methodology course. Instead of writing a page, a criticism of, I say a critique of a study, why don't you try and condense it into 140 characters and then let me know? And so here's his tweet: IQ and exercise, a huge sample size of 1.2 million, but no women in the sample. That's a huge methodological flaw that he was able to point out through a tweet. Or here, chewing gum and caloric intake. Should we be concerned that Wrigley Science Foundation funded this? Valid question, Kath B. You know, very concise and very to the point. So you can be creative in the way that you do things. You can also create a hashtag for your course, which I've done before. And Mark, I'll open the mic in just 1 second. So what you could do is hashtag, put the name of your course, maybe the term and the year, something so it's distinct. Or if you just want it for like TCS 101 and have every student who's ever taken it be a part of this Twitter chat, then you can open it up like that. There are options there. So let's see, Mark, I can read your question. How do you ensure students read your tweets? You can't. That's the thing about social media. You can encourage them. You can. I don't know that you would require them, but it's really a vehicle. So it's not if you have a Twitter feed and you want your students to read it, it's not probably something that would be tied with a learning outcome and aligned within the course in terms of accreditation. But you could require them to respond to your tweets or yeah, be creative in that way. One thing I did for a course was I created a custom hashtag, and then I embedded the what do you call it, the Twitter feed right into the course. And so people can see throughout the semester, they can see the contributors. Not everybody contributed, and I didn't force everybody to contribute, and I don't suggest that. But a lot of people did, and so that was pretty fun. So one example of, social media and the collaborative nature of social media, San Francisco State and San Diego State, they had two classes. One was called Green Media, Media Studies course devoted to making media about making food. So these are students who learned about how to be a cameraman, how to take photographs of food, or how to be a cameraman for cooking shows about food. And this other course, at San Diego State, was Composition, Food, and You, where they would look at food from literature, from fictional literature, and they would try and recreate those dishes. These two classes started collaborating with each other, where one would cook the food and the other would record and preserve the food and publish about the food. And it sounded like a great example. I mean, a great experience for them. Some of the tweets from some of the students, best class of my life, so full, so happy. I've never had a student tweet that about my course. This person, I'm so excited for tomorrow for my green media class. And then a link to her blog, so multiple social media. For one, the purpose of the class is contribute to social media, but then they're tweeting about it, they're hashtagging, and then they're tweeting their blog posts where they write up about the social media. So it really engages them in that connectivist standpoint. Excuse me. I'll save the best for last here, or the biggest for last. We're talking about Facebook right here. And for time, I'm going to wrap it up as I'm talking about the most important platform, right, in social media, or at least the most popular. Facebook. You can create a course within Facebook, or a page within Facebook for your course, and have students enroll the students or encourage them to enroll. Now the QR code that I have up here, another social media example, is to a research article that was done by, I believe, Baylor, where they looked at Facebook and integrating it, and they gave some tips. And so I'm going to read through those tips. For one, the membership within the Facebook page should be voluntary. Don't require them to join, although probably a lot of them will if it's active. It should be a closed group where members are invited and approvals are handled by the instructor or the professor. The participation, both faculty and students should participate by posting information, maybe media. They can ask questions, comments. They can contribute their own posts, incorporate the content outside of the class to the class, and then they can like each other's posts as well. There should be content there already before the students log in, so they're not creating a community from scratch. It should be created beforehand, and then students are directed to add their own content to it. In terms of seeding, you should seed the online discussion in the class by asking the students to post pictures and videos related to certain concepts that's going on within Canvas, within the classroom, and get them involved, get them polling, vote, try and get the passive users to be more involved. And part of that is through advertising as well. The participation should be strongly encouraged in class through Canvas. You can add URLs to the course, or even you can create a QR code like this one where people will scan it with their phones and then they can drop into the class. And Canvas Facebook can even be used for study groups sometimes. So with my last minute, I'm going to give a few words of advice. And I'm just going to, if it's okay, I'm just going to spit these off really quickly. But with social media, we don't want to replicate old technology. Think film strips, slideshows, recorded lectures. We don't want to just put that traditional media into this new space. You also want to be very clear. I think I might have, no, I didn't put it to yet. Save that for later. You want to be clear. You don't want unclear instructions like, teams A and B will post to Flickr on alternate Tuesdays starting next week, but skipping the week of St. Patrick's Day and also Tuesdays that have 3 in the date. You've got to be very clear about that. And remember the social part of social media. We want students to talk to each other. A word about FERPA as well. FERPA is not intended to prevent learning from being public. You just need to be mindful of grading and your public feedback within the social media platform. But the point is really of social media in education is to enable more learning, not just to generate work. It shouldn't be a distraction. And know that communities do require time and resources. You don't want to overwhelm them, but you want to make it a welcome community. And so I'll end. I know I'm at time now. I'm at the hour. We're going to talk about social media. So here's a veteran. This was floating around on Imager, a social media image sharing platform. If you can't see it, I know it's a little grainy here, but a soldier here with a computer in a public space with a children's book that I can only see. I might be reading between the lines, but I think he's doing a web conference with his kid reading a children's book over the internet. Really, social media, that's the purpose. This is the foundation of social media, is to bring people together. And if we can do that in education, then I think that's really stepping up our game and really involving more people. So with that, that's our presentation. I'll go ahead and